Hey folks, it's Sam, and I'm doing a quick video here on the shift of Jupiter into Aquarius. It's going to be there until April of 2022. You see, I'm recording this. This is actually November 24th, um, and I have the chart up here. This is actually of December 4th, but you see Jupiter has gone into Aquarius, and we're going to be talking about this transit of Jupiter through Aquarius between now and April of 2022. So it's a big shift. Now Jupiter has finally cleared Capricorn for good. He'd been going back and forth in Capricorn since actually the beginning of COVID. So you could mark this time now as the final clearance, I would say, of Jupiter moving out of Capricorn once and for all. It had been poking his head in and out of Capricorn since early 2020. And yes, that was right around the time that COVID started and we all got locked into our house. He went back and forth through Capricorn, went into Aquarius, poked his head back into Capricorn, and now finally is clearing Capricorn entirely. So I'm going to talk about what that means. And of course, that means that he'll be in Aquarius, and then he goes into Pisces next April 2022, where he'll be for the next year. So we got like about a year and a half or so of really positive Jupiter transits ahead. So before I get to that, though, I did also just want to give a shout out also to the fact that I'm finishing my final enrollment for my certification course for 2021. Those who register now will be eligible to get certified next June. If you apply yourself, you'll be able to do that, and it'll be a great chance for you to really do astrology at a high level. Already have 15 or 20 new registrants in the last couple weeks, but I just put a link there in the description in the chat box for you. It's actually VedicAstrologyCertification.com. If you haven't gone there to get the free classes, you want to do that. It's really, even if you don't sign up and get certified, you wind up getting 4.5 hours of free class material just for signing up. But there's a great webinar that you can watch that outlines the whole program, gives you the history of the certification program, because I've been doing it for more than 10 years, and it's been validated and certified by some great gurus and teachers, and of course a lot of great students over the years. So you can go ahead and check that out as well. But the real business of today is to talk about the shift of Jupiter into Aquarius, which we're going to be experiencing for the next several months. So as you see, this chart was for the 4th, December 4th. But again, Jupiter just went into Aquarius on the 23rd of November, or 22nd, one of them. He just poked his head in there. And so again, you want to see this as a kind of end of a shift that began when Jupiter entered Capricorn it was actually in January of 2020. So that was when Jupiter, or actually, I'm sorry, it wasn't January 2020. Let me just pull it up here real quick. It was March. Let's see. Yeah, it was actually March 2020, or let me do 1 second here. Exact. Or no, it was the end of March of 2020. Jupiter poked his head right in Capricorn. The end of March 2020. So you can see that's right when we all kind of went on lockdown and had to sort of hunker down since that time. So since the end of March 2020, Jupiter went into Capricorn back and forth a few times. Then he went out and went into Aquarius, which was earlier this year. In April of this year, he went into Aquarius, and then he turned retrograde, went back into Capricorn. Now he's finally cleared it entirely. So we can see this transit of Jupiter going through Capricorn as being that sort of time since March of 2020. Think of how far the world has, or how much the world has changed since then. And, people like myself said that it was going to be a time when our faith was going to be tested, our beliefs were going to be challenged. Many people have gotten into some very dark beliefs. Notice, this has really been the rise. This was all of 2020 and all of the, fear and paranoia around COVID and the emergence of all of the conspiratorial thinking and the, how it went from we're just in a pandemic and being locked down and having to wait this out to now where it's gotten, like where things are now on the other side of that with, so many different polarized ideas around whether it was a, pandemic and the, the whole conspiracies and all of the stuff that's sort of come up around it, all the polarizing around, people losing friendships and the whole controversies around wearing masks and getting vaccines and all the stuff. That era of, again, Jupiter in Capricorn with Saturn, and this feeling of having our beliefs and our sense of hope and purpose and more, inspired, beliefs has now shifted. It's moved on. A big part of it was related to the Jupiter and Capricorn energy. And so with that shifting, we can be anticipating and also creating more of a hopeful future, the future that we want to create in the world. We can be using less of our fear of being dominated, fear of dominant structures. Certainly we can recognize that there are domineering and oppressive structures in the world, which, by the way, have always been there. They didn't start with COVID. Maybe you just started paying attention at that time. But for those of us who've been paying attention for a long time, we didn't just notice it with COVID. There's been oppressive oligarchy and plutocracy and business and fascistic business corporate structures and entities and organizations that have been running rampant for decades now. For those of us who've been watching for a long time and didn't just wake up during COVID like a lot of people did in 2020, now that they're locked in their home and they can't leave, now they start waking up in perhaps one of the most paranoid, conspiratorial, dark times ever. That's when they start drawing all their conclusions around the world. They had been asleep before that, then they wake up. Well, guess what? I get maybe if you're one who just woke up during that time, you woke up to something that's been there the whole time. So maybe your perspective was a little bit skewed, thinking that now all of a sudden this just started. This stuff has been going on a long time. But what it also means is that it's very possible to be prone to a lot of misinformation and disinformation and hyperbole and manipulation, particularly by interests and people in politics and political organizations and social movements that want to terrify you and scare you and turn you against someone else and make for scapegoats and all of those other things, which is really the big thing that happened that I noticed more than anything. It's obviously still there, of the last year and a half since, you could say April of 2020 or, March, April 2020, since we all got locked in our houses in COVID. The thing that I've noticed and that I noticed before is that so many people who I knew who really never paid much attention to these things at all suddenly now, quote, were woke, but they were woke based on utter paranoid, triggering, conspiracies that are not proven. You can always draw and pull threads of ideas together and say, see, now they're all conspiring to do this. And that's just simply not correct. When you're at the height of fear and you're being certainly preyed upon, that's the last time or the worst time to start becoming certain about something. And notice how many of these things have been proven to be completely wrong at this point, particularly things like the QAnon really exploded. All of these kinds of things really started. And so the reason I'm talking about this right now is because this whole idea of being manipulated and coerced by power structures includes that. That's part of it. PSYOPs, organizations and governments and political parties and media organizations that also want to manipulate you against the other side also are perpetrators and purveyors of this misinformation and this fear mongering. And I've seen people just repeat these mantras. The mainstream media is blah blah blah. Of course, that's a mainstream media spin from one side, which is calling the other side mainstream media, and this side and that side, and it's all just that we've just the last year. Again, I'm trying to be sort of neutral about the whole thing in that we've had so many of these dark messages and dark philosophies coming at us for the last year and a half or so from all directions, from right wing, left wing, up and down, conspiratorial, PSYOPs. PSYOPs means psychological operations, where governments or organizations, media organizations, or other kinds of organizations like right-wing or left-wing propaganda organizations using the tools available, especially like social media tools, to infect and infiltrate our psychology, psychological operation, right? Like in our elections, in our, to get you to buy things or to get you to believe something. So we've seen the emergence of all of these kinds of PSYOPs and all of these kinds of coercive, manipulative, sort of messaging coming at us, accelerated, especially toward the dark, and all of the dark implications that have happened since Jupiter went into Capricorn, since like March, April of 2020. So I'm talking about this now so you can see this as a cycle. Notice how different things were before we all got locked in our house in 2020. That started when Jupiter entered Capricorn. It just now stopped for good. Again, Jupiter went into Aquarius for a while, but then it went back, and now it's clearing it for good. So regardless of how you came down on all of those issues and whatnot, whether right or left or up or down or this or that, notice how much of that has been all pervasive in culture. Notice how many friendships you've lost, how many people that have, suddenly just became sort of believing any sort of dark fantasy. And again, believing Jupiter, dark, paranoid, scary fantasy, Capricorn, Saturn. This has been a huge cultural phenomena that the world went through since April of 2020. And on the other side of that, we are now moving past it. We're finally completely going to be rid of that tendency. So wherever you are on that spectrum of not just believing dark fantasies or whatever, but about that example, because I'm just using that as an example. And I talk about the news and these cultural things because these are touchstones that we can all see. We've all saw the world do this the last year and a half. But in your personal life, you've also seen this happen. I've seen this happen in my personal life as well. I saw people who were friends, friends, lovers, whatever, all of a sudden also just get into this whole kind of dark reality idea and sort of retreat into their bunker and and be prone to that. And I myself as well have gotten really got a bit gun shy about a lot of things too, because of how I saw people responding and people reacting. And often, again, we can see the specifics of how these things manifest. It's often based on an individual's natal chart, like someone who has a difficult Saturn or difficult Jupiter or whatever is influencing those planets in someone's natal chart. They're going to be more prone to these kinds of excesses when those energies piled up like that, or whatever it might be. That's individually. But in your individual life and with the people around you, the shift of Jupiter now going through Aquarius, where he's going to be until April 13th of next year, and then he goes into Pisces, where he's going to be established for the next year after that. So from April 2022 until April 2023, Jupiter will be in Pisces. This really shows a great shift for us all, a great shift for humanity, to really sort of turn the page a lot on the last year of the COVID intensity, how it's changed so many things, how, we were so triggered by, again, the sort of dark, paranoid, the things out of our control, which is really what it's felt like with Saturn really dominating Jupiter. Because, the Jupiter in Capricorn was really showing this quality of Jupiter being dominated by Saturn. And when I say dominated, it means that Saturn is really strong and Jupiter is very weak. He's not only weak in Capricorn, but again, when he's then dominated by the ruler, then the ruler kind of takes all of that, and we wind up finding hope, quote, or looking for inspiration in things that are very dark and sort of scary, like the Saturn energy. So what tends to wind up happening when planets join like that, particularly when one is in difficult dignity and the other one is in a powerful dignity, it's what's called a Nichabanga yoga, because a debilitated planet joined its ruler. The ruler winds up taking the energy and saving the day, like helping us get through that thing. But he winds up doing it by taking the other planet's energy and sort of dominating it and taking it over. So rather than being filled with that hope of Jupiter, that pure hope, and being hopeful, which is Jupiter's nature, the hope gets kind of beaten down because it goes into Capricorn. And not only that, but then the hope we become hopeful about something that's really dark and almost kind of hoping for the destruction of things, and like this kind of dark, hopeful, strange, twisted ideas. Again, this is kind of what we started to see, like hope that it's all going to burn down, and again, this sort of romance of the darkness. And I don't think anybody really wants to see everything blow up and be destroyed and have civilization smashed against the rocky shore of reality so that we can all start over like agrarian animals shivering in the darkness. That'll show us, or whatever dark fantasy played through, has kind of played through people's minds on some level. Not like anyone was really wishing for that, but on some level there's been these kind of even sort of strange, almost death wishes or something going on with certain pockets of reality. And so again, I just want to say that these kinds of things that we've seen are really on the mend now. They're on the retreat. And so I feel really good and feel really hopeful about Jupiter moving into Aquarius. Aquarius is a sign of culture, of our collective relationship with each other, where we see a higher possibility, where we see a group activity, and the needs of the many outnumbering the needs of the few, or the needs of us as an individual. Aquarius is opposite Leo, which is the glory of the individual. So with the Jupiter in Aquarius, it's about that individuality aligned with a higher purpose. Community, making the world a better place, committing to things that are bigger than just our lifetime and our fears and our sort of hunkering down mentality, which is really what Capricorn is. So again, all of that stuff about being locked in the house and all of that, which started, and that mentality, I still see so much exaggeration around, even very recently, around, look, nobody I know wants, any kind of vaccine mandates, and nobody wants any of it. No one does. No one wants anything like that. I've ever met. You don't want the government telling you anything. But most people understand the need, at least, to have some kind of a regulation, at least for us to be able to make some semblance of getting back to society, etc. Aside from the fact that we're now getting more therapeutics and pharmaceuticals to handle COVID literally, one of the things that I just really started to notice the last month or so is those people who are still in that kind of, people are still in a bunker mentality, as if it was March 2022 or something. We're tired of lockdowns. We're tired of this. We haven't had lockdown. We only had a lockdown for a couple months. There hasn't been lockdowns for way more than a year. Now, there's been restrictions, there's been protocols, there's been limits, there's been all kinds of stuff, but you still see people acting like we're still going to get locked down, or we're still going to get this, and we're still going to get that. Look, I understand, like I said, none of us want any of these restrictions. All of us want to just live our life. But I still see so much of that kind of, or the sort of bunker mentality, like we're still, Joe Biden is still right on the verge of lockdowns. We're not going back to lockdowns and all this. Like, nobody's near, we're not, we're nowhere near that. Again, we still have to be vigilant, because there's still strains that could emerge and whatever. But the only reason I'm bringing this up is because still seeing that hyperbolic, overly fearful rhetoric, where, because we've been so programmed with this Jupiter in Capricorn to have that kind of bunker mentality, as if the fact that there's still there's vaccine mandates and all like this, it still means we're right on the verge of getting locked down again. Like, we haven't had a lockdown. I mean, I don't know what country people are living in, and me, I live in crazy California, which is one of the worst in the country. We haven't had a lockdown in God knows how long. People are living their life. There's still restrictions here and there, but I don't know what world people are living in. They're so acting like all this is still going on. But it's like this Jupiter in Capricorn, stuff, where there's just still this idea, we just can't get out of the idea that we're all on the verge of lockdown, all this stuff happening. No, we're not. Hasn't been that way for a long time. But again, I think this feeling of Jupiter going back into Capricorn, and then, as soon as it happens, see, now we're going to have all the vaccine passports and all this stuff. And because there were restrictions put in place where, if you didn't get the shot, then you were going to have to get tested a lot, or you might lose your job. Look, nobody thinks any of that is a great idea. But most of us also just realize that there's some, common sense things that have to happen. So all I'm saying is that this kind of intense, fearful expectation, projection, and idea that we're going to be back in the bunker again, we're going to start seeing some of that idea changing. And with Jupiter moving through Aquarius, we're going to start expecting, not just expecting, but seeing less of the triggering around that. And of course, we always have to be vigilant to what the government is doing and all of that. Of course, I'm not for everything. I see all of it. Do I think the government is overstepped? Yes, I think at times. Absolutely. But do I understand why? Yes, I understand why also. There's always a bit of a fear also from the government. The government, people in government being afraid that, well, if we don't make sure and be careful, then we might get another outbreak again, and then something else might happen. So we need to be really careful and cautious about it. Yeah, all of it can be possible, but it doesn't mean that just because, certain, government organizations or whatever are cautious, it means they're ready to, take away all our rights, and before you know it, it's Nuremberg or it's the Holocaust or whatever it might be. Again, there's going to be a segment, and there's going to be some who are just going to go there. But I think now we're going to get there will be much less of that triggering. And I think it's because we're all going to, this is what the astrology shows, is that our mind changes. These planets moving through signs show different, karmas and samskaras in our mind. So again, Jupiter in Capricorn, retrograde, even when it was, and with Saturn, brings that kind of a sort of bunker mentality a little bit anyway, where Capricorn is a sign where we feel like we're just trying to survive. That's literally what the sign is, where we become aware that there's danger and we're just trying to survive it. But Aquarius is this next sign. Aquarius is the sign after, where we've already survived. Like, okay, we survived. We're going to survive. Now that we've survived, how do we, and we've been humbled, because once we face our fears and we're humbled by them, then we're grateful. And now we want to show up and serve. We want to serve. And that's a big part of the Aquarius psychology, is to now serve something higher than just our own fears and stresses and worries, and also something that is that is bigger than ourself, and something that will outlive us all. And I'll just say, speaking of that a little bit, I put the link there again. This is the page. If you click that, you can go and learn these. Get 4.5 hours of bonus classes, learn about the system of astrology, and actually everything you need to know, and hours of follow-up training. And again, I've been teaching these courses for this certification course for like 10 years. You can see there's all of these videos you get for free. 4.5 hours of bonus classes really teach you the whole system of astrology. Sacred astronomy, text and more, principle stacking, principles, methods, and outcomes, priority sequence, case studies, and you learn all about these things. And you can just go there, click to reserve your spot, and register there, and you can get that. So again, this is my way of bringing us together around good teachings. You don't have to buy anything; it's all free. You just give me your email address, and I'll send you that info. And then you can also get information about the about the certification course. And so this is what we're all going to be looking forward to in the next, at least in the next several months, as Jupiter moves through Aquarius and goes into Pisces after that. So again, Jupiter in Aquarius, we're going to be more aligned with culture, with larger themes, with coming together around what unites us. After having gone through a lot of these difficult transits, even having maybe had some friendships pressured, even maybe lost some friendships, maybe revisiting some of those things, and reconnecting, especially around common goals and whatnot, that are beyond just our triggering. I think that there's a great possibility there, because we're not going to be feeling as I say, like hunkered down and just trying to survive it all. The larger theme as well, and I'm going to actually do a dedicated like COVID update, probably next week or something like that. But there's been so many positives having gone through COVID. And unfortunately, again, the reason that I'm talking about the negative part of it is because so much of it now has seemed like it's been negative because of this Jupiter going through Capricorn as well. We've totally overlooked all of the benefits. And I said it when it started, that there was going to be a lot of great benefits to going through what we went through, especially as it relates to work, our workplace, that once we started to have the experience of being able to work remotely, it was going to cut down on all of that wasted travel, especially just for work. I also talked about how I thought that it was going to really promote a renaissance in health, especially, holistic health, and particularly as it relates to treating animals better and the relationship between nature and our food choices, and vegetarianism, or, not eating as much meat. I said specifically, we've seen that like blow up, that there was going to be much more of a focus on natural health, which there has been. And that on the other side of that, it was going to be progress. Now, again, because we're still sort of dealing with the trauma of all of the misinformation and the paranoia and the people that don't want to let it go. And again, I'm not saying all of it's paranoid. I'm not saying we shouldn't have had healthy skepticism about the way the government, especially, and again, one of the things I don't hear hardly anyone talking about, we want to invent scenarios and make people evil and satanic and all, because that's the easiest way to do it. The biggest thing that happened was what our governments did, especially the US government, is it used it as a great excuse to make a big power grab and to take all the money. And we hardly got any of it. Other countries didn't do it nearly as bad as we did in the US, like we do in the US. I don't hear anybody talking about there's no conspiracy there. It happened right in front of our face. Where's the outrage about that? Where's the outrage about the fact that we don't have healthcare? Where's the outrage about what's right in front of our face? No, it's not that. It's some paranoid conspiracy that is way overblown. The biggest thing isn't a conspiracy that's hard to figure out. It's what we can see and the laws that they passed right in our face, right in front of us. That's the big swindle. So, but aside from all of that, what I did see was going to be a great benefit, and what I do see as a great benefit already, and we're going to see it play out even more, is a reliance on our own personal health, healthy habits, healthy eating, really taking seriously a lot of these issues. A lot of people, since they did have time to be alone, a lot of people started a new practice of, studying these spiritual, teachings and practices and whatnot with a lot of the time they had on their hands. So there's a lot of great benefits that happened having gone through that we haven't really even thought about, or hardly no one is really talking about, because we've been so wrapped up in the weird conspiratorial end of it that the politicians and the media have fed us all. And again, that's there, but it's time for us to personally and culturally rise to the next level. And this Jupiter in Aquarius is really a way for us to stop taking these right-wing and left-wing media trances and repeating them at each other, and come together in something that's higher than that. That's what Aquarius is. Seeing beyond the polarizing, seeing beyond the psyops and the negative paranoid, fearful imaging and fearful messaging, and coming together in something that's more transcendent and universal for us culturally. And so now Jupiter clearly established in that, not just poking his head in there like he did earlier this year and then going retrograde and going back into Capricorn, because that's what happened earlier this year. In April, Jupiter poked his head into Aquarius. That's why this summer or this spring, it was like, we're getting back to something normal. And then he goes retrograde, goes back into Capricorn. He's now just coming out of that. And so we're going to start to really feel the benefit of those things. Mukta Sharma says, I joined online astrology classes. It has given me so much understanding and peace. Yes, these things have really, these have been a lot of the great benefits, of that. Margot says, Aquarius looks to the future, not going back, new ways, unity. Yes, this is what I'm saying. We're still, look, we have to realize, and again, this is why I'm talking about all these dark things. It's not because I feel like dredging it up. I'm ready to get past it. But the reason I'm talking about it is because I want everybody to understand we're just now coming out of that cycle. And we're kind of like, sort of like trauma victims a little bit. With Jupiter having gone through Capricorn that long, we're just now coming out of it just a couple days ago. Jupiter just went into Aquarius and he's not going back. So now it's going forward. So we can start, and it's up to us. It's up to you, up to me, up to all of us to start that process of looking for ways to elevate now and to connect that Jupiter in Aquarius with that larger social world that we all want to create together. No one wants to be divided like this. Again, and the problem and the biggest tragedy, I think, for all of us is to see how we've been manipulated by media and by media figures and by political figures and whatnot to be calling these people are the problem. These people are the problem. These people are the problem. None of us want to see that. None of us want to believe that half the country is the problem, or that the half the country thinks we're the problem, or not just the country, but the world. We all know that's wrong. We know it's wrong. So we need to see beyond both. And what happened is Jupiter is our philosophies and what's inspiring us. And we've gone through a very dark time where our inspirations were very dark and we were controlled by these powerful forces, these media companies, these social media companies, these politicians. All this is this Capricorn structure, this Saturn structure that was sort of dominating our hopeful narratives. So we need to shed that, and it's going to be easy to shed that and come together more as brothers and sisters again, and realize that mostly everything we have in common, we have in common. We all want the same things. No one wants the government to control them. No one wants anybody to have to get vaccines or to have this or to die or to do any of that stuff. None of us. Because we have some disagreements about how it should happen or whatever, doesn't mean we're devils or inhumane or whatever. We have some disagreements and we have to work through them. But again, there's a larger context to everything. We have to be careful to not, demonize each other and fall into all of that programming. And it's going to be easier now to not do that. But we have to do it. We have to be that change. We have to be that unifying presence. So that's what I'm saying, that those of you hearing this, spread this word. Spread this word and live that message. Live that. Be that change you want to see. Be the change you want to see. And have it be a hopeful change and a unifying message. And to me, the unifying theme and the unifying message is that we've all been sort of co-opted in one way or another for the last year and a half or so. All of those dark, polarizing messages. This is also the thing that's been so obvious to see. and so obvious that we need to move past it and embrace the positive changes that have come and the improvements that we can make based on that. So again, I see this shift of Jupiter into Aquarius as a great opportunity to move into the next level, move into the next cycle of social connection and duty and responsibility to each other. Maybe that's overly hopeful, but it's better than being overly cynical and bitter. And we have seen remarkable progress. I don't know if you've noticed, but for example, in the vegetarian, like in the veggie meat industry and the mock meat and the this vegetarian world, and the world where people aren't just mindlessly eating sentient beings, there's been huge progress. This is one of the most quickly and rapidly expanding industries in the world, are these meat substitutes. And that's only good. There's no downside to that. That we're not just going to be mindlessly slaughtering animals is enormous progress. All of the healthy, natural, return to that as being a priority is also very important. All of the focus that's come on natural health, and how even all of the government solutions, even things like vaccines, which, again, I see them as something that can be really beneficial and necessary to some extent, but it's not the solution. It's a very bad solution. The better solution is better health, better lifestyle habits, again. And these things are being focused on a lot more now. A lot more fitness and wellness has emerged since COVID. We're seeing the dying of an old paradigm and the emergence of the new paradigm, socially as well, in all ways. So a lot of these things are colliding at the same time. And those who really want to keep things where they were are the ones that are really resistant. And so this whole shift is a positive one. And I want you to keep that in mind. That's why I wanted to do this. It's easy to lose hope. And again, especially if you watch the news or even you watch commentators, even commentators that I used to think were kind of interesting and kind of funny. Everybody now has got to be some kind of hip social commentator. Even some of the people, I'm not even going to say their names because all of them, to me, all of them make me sick. But you want to understand that all these people now are mainstream. I just want to say this last thing, even just as a point of reference. We used to say mainstream media as if it's just legacy media like on TV. But anything you see, even famous commenters on YouTube or Facebook or whatever, all of it is mainstream now. I'll just say, Joe Rogan is mainstream. Okay, Russell Brand is mainstream. I'll say a couple of them. They're not alternative. They're all mainstream. And when I say mainstream, I mean they're all just different voices now. None of it is alternative anymore. None of it is alternative. If you can watch it, I'm mainstream. If you want to look at it, I'm on YouTube. It's like I'm on your TV, okay? So to act like there's some kind of alternative channel or that this kind of thing is alternative or whatever, all of it is mainstream now. There's nothing cutting edge about any of this stuff. And it's like all of the influencers now, everybody's got to be an influencer and get out there, and everybody's so cynical, all of the cynicism. Nobody can just look toward a hopeful future. To me, all of it to me, they're all gross. Even if I've liked some of the stuff some of them have said, it takes now about 5 minutes before they're off on something that they haven't put 2 seconds of thought in, but they're just running their mouth with opinions that aren't thought out and shaping public opinion. So don't be a sheep. If you want to, a real sheep is anybody who's listened to any of it, frankly, in my opinion. People who act like they're not a sheep because they're parroting what Joe Rogan is saying or this person, you think you're not a sheep? You think that's alternative? Are you kidding me? More popular than any new show on the internet or on TV. There's nothing cutting edge about parroting what Russell Brand is saying or Joe Rogan or whatever. There's nothing. There's no creativity in that. That's as mainstream as anything. That's all I'm saying is that. So all of the narratives now, everything is just a narrative and blah blah, and people are utterly disconnected from their own wisdom, and from that wisdom that is much more fundamental than any of that stuff. The wisdom of your community, of your body, of your breath, of the moment, of your choices that don't have to harm others or whatever it might be. That's still, my practices and my routines, I've been following the same thing for 40 years. And they revolve around things like yoga and meditation and all of that. And they're not going to change because there's COVID or Joe Rogan or Rachel Maddow or whatever it is that people think is like, oh, I'm just looking for, who do I trust? This is the thing. We're looking for media voices and ideas to trust. Who do I trust to tell me what's going on? Oh, I'm not trusting mainstream media. I listen to Joe Rogan. I got to laugh my head off. Are you kidding? Or whatever it might be, whatever it is. And I'm not trying to make fun of anybody. I'm just saying that you want to look for what to trust. You have to trust the moment, the breath, consciousness. This is why you study and you should understand things like these transcendent spiritual practices. Trust that, because they lead you to the only place of trust, the only point of trust, which is in your heart, based on your practices, based on authentic wisdom that you applied wisdom, not something up in your head where you now believe what this person said. So now you think you're making progress. You're not. You've just caught an idea. I used to call them you've just caught an idea virus. Like we catch an idea and we're like, okay, this is my idea. No, you heard the idea from someone else. There are no new ideas. We're all just catching each other's ideas. You're catching some of my ideas right now. And if there's a good one, then just let the idea compel you to practice and be quiet and still and breathe. That's about the best idea that we've ever come up with as a human being. No human beings are going to have ideas better than that. I don't care who they are. Because if you get that idea and then you actually do something and you do what the idea says, then you can trust that. You can trust that. And from there, it's very easy to not lose hope. So I'm talking about these things this way because, again, Jupiter moving into Aquarius is a time where it'll be easier for us to remember those hopeful teachings and also align with each other again. Come together again as brothers and sisters, which is what we are. We're brothers and sisters under the same sky, the same planets, the same sun. The sun rises for all of us. The moon, if you look up at the moon right now, you're looking at the same moon I'm looking at. I could see it out the window over there. If you look at the moon right now, you and I are both looking at the same moon. Go ahead. I'm looking at it. Go ahead. Look. Let's look at the moon together, folks. I'm looking at it. I see it. Venus is also over there. Not so close to it, but so we're all doing it. That's who we are. That's who we are. That's what we're doing. It never is much more complicated than that. Think of how much worry and drama has been the last year or so. And what did any of it accomplish? Did it accomplish anything? And then think of all the good things that could have happened. All the good things that could have happened. And that did happen. And that have happened for you. Think of all the good things that have happened for you. Even because of something like COVID. Like, for example, like getting more acquainted with certain things that you've had time to study things. Again, this is the other stuff I said last year. We have time. we have some more time than we've had before, right? We have time to really feel ourselves and see ourselves. So we're on the other side of that. Jupiter is going through Aquarius until April. Then he's in Pisces, the most mystical of them all. So life is good, folks, really. And it's the day before Thanksgiving. I'm thankful for all of you who, on the other side of these cameras, I know you're living your lives like I'm living my life. I don't take it for granted. You're a real person to me there. I know that it's this technology is miraculous that we can share with each other, and you can feel my presence now beaming to you wherever you are. You know, the Vedic rishis would have considered this the greatest miracle in the world. They referred to technologies like this that bend time and space. You know, literally right now, you're participating in my time and space. I'm sitting here in this time and space, and it's going right to your time and space. So we're all time travelers now. We live in miraculous times with miraculous possibilities. And one of the greatest possibilities is that time and space that you have now that no people ever before had as much as you have. For millions of years, people were just trying to live and eat. That's all. Their entire life was consumed with that. We live lives of ridiculous luxury compared to what has come before. So we need not waste it. We have to be mindful to not waste the time we have, because it's much less than we think. And be grateful for the time we have and for each other. And so I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for those of you who will listen to me, who put into practice these teachings and who make the world a better place. That's really where we're at. That's really what the next year and a half or so is really going to be about. So I hope this finds you well, and I hope that your Thanksgiving holiday is joyous and peaceful. And we'll talk soon.